Ah, okay. Did I ask you if you knew Dallas Clark?
Good afternoon, board members, staff, members of the audience. Let the record show that today is May 15th and the time is 1:30 p.m. and we will now call the Amherst County Service Authority Board to order. Is there anyone here wishing to make citizen comment? Seeing and hearing none, we will now close citizen comments and move on to an approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved, Madam Chair.
Motion on the floor by Mr. Ayers. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The agenda is now approved, and we'll go on to approval of minutes. Board members, are there any changes that you've seen? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved, Madam Chair.
Motion on the floor by Mr. Ayers. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The minutes of April 7th are now approved, and we move on to our monthly financial report. Mr. Hopkins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, everybody. Not real good news through the month of March. First of all, I need to point out a bust in the financial report. I had a couple of typos. Under sales, that the negative 5.4% should be negative 9.6%, and the negative 5.4% should be under total revenues. I guess I was in a hurry on to get the agenda published and out. But you can see that the numbers are not good. We're down almost 10% in sales. Total revenues actually were better than was reported last month by about 50%. We cut the it was over 10% last month in a deficit for total revenues from water. Now we're down about half that. So it's better, but of course still not good. And the betterment is actually coming not so much from water sales, but from connections. We had a real good month for connections, 7 totaling over $30,000, which really helped us out in total revenues. Wastewater is about the same as last month. We're about 20% in the hole compared to the same period last year. That's in sales, and total revenues down about 10%. So, and we did have 2 connections in sewer, but overall in sales we're down almost 12.5% compared to March of last year, which is not good. But revenues, because of the connections, are down only about 6.5%. So it's better, but still not good. We've talked before about what I think the slow start for this year is. It's got to do with of course, the training center closing. They moved their last patient out in early March, so we lost most of water revenue we're getting from the training center. And possibly a new issue is COVID-19. I don't know how or why. That I would have thought that sales would actually go up with people and kids being home, but that's actually not happening. The worst news, and it's not really news, it's a concern on my part. I'm wondering if the next 2-3 months at least are going to be worse than what we're seeing right now. I mean, this is through March, and the mandated business closures didn't hit until late March. So this doesn't even affect that. I mean, that's not even reflected in this report. We may see that next month. And the month after that, we may start seeing the impact of residents not paying water and sewer bills because they've been hit with financial impacts. So the next couple of months are going to be real tough, or could be real tough for us. I'm hoping not, but I'm thinking that it's very possible that's going to happen. And that's all I've got with the financial report, unless you'll have any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hawkins. Board members, if it's okay with you, let the record show that both Mr. Woods and Mr. Perot are here with us today. And I would suggest that at this meeting going forward, to they're permanently on the board, that we extend a professional courtesy to them to ask questions or make statements that they feel are relevant, even though you all cannot vote because of the rules. Everybody okay with that? Okay. All right. Thank you. Moving on, Mr. Hopkins?
Okay, next item on the agenda is old business, director's report. Nothing much new on James River Bank stabilization. The same things are going on there that's been going on for the last several months. The water sewer infrastructure projects, the Old Town Madison Heights sewer rehabilitation project, the CDBG grant project is now closed. We've got the paperwork. You've got a copy of the letter in your packet. Got the letter from DHCD last week or the week before. And we should be getting the final reimbursement from DHCD sometime soon. Nothing new on the Woodview Drive water line replacement. I'm working on other easements right now, so haven't got much further on that. The Lakeview Drive sewer extension, that is, I've got some developments on that. I've gotten almost all the easements back to Mr. Lockerbie, county attorney, for final approval. And what I'm planning on doing is mailing them to everybody. And the reason I've kind of stepped this up is because I was talking with the Department of Health about 3-4 weeks ago, and there is stimulus money available for construction-ready projects. And we are construction-ready, except for having the easements. So I'm working with Gary Gillum and Sarah Lewis at Department of Health, and I'm going to get the easements out of here and hopefully get them back, get them recorded, and then we can get a grant application. Well, I guess Gary's probably already working on a grant application. And I don't know what the specifics are, whether it's 100%, 50% grant match, I don't know. But there is money out there, and Gary said when I mentioned to him that the money's out there, he was falling all over himself thanking me, because they're really trying to find projects, and they've been having a lot of problems finding them. So I think this might be something that they're going to be willing to jump on. So I'll keep you informed about that. Nothing much new on the Old Madison pump station upgrade or the reservoir primary spillway upgrades. That's still going to be done late this summer. On the water and sewer relocations for the VDOT Woody Lake Road Improvements Project, they had construction bids open last week. There was only one bidder, Perelman and Pace, and their bid was $1.3 million, which was about $100,000 more than her profit assessment. And when Mike Wilson and I were talking after the meeting, and he said he was going to have to get back in touch with VDOT, because VDOT had already told him that his estimate was more money than they had actually put into the project to do this. So now we're talking about another $100,000. So he's going to talk to VDOT and see what they want to do. They may want to go through and re-advertise, but I'm thinking not, because they're in a hurry to get this project done so they can proceed with the road improvements project. So I'll keep you informed what's going on with that in the future. Water line replacements, Phelps Road school project. We've got review comments on the plans from the VDOT. They weren't bad at all. Those plans are going back in. I'm hoping to get a second review approval. I've got 3 contractor quotes for the directional bore work of that, and I know who we want to go with. The county purchasing officer, I sent them to him, and he approved that to proceed. And I'm working with Georgie Jones and also our crew to do the remaining part of the project. And I've been in touch with Waukesha about the final alignment of the work. We want to make sure we're putting it in a place that's not going to affect their work or their finished project, and also the schedule. So we're still looking at getting started this spring and having it done by late summer.
I had a question.
Yes, ma'am.
On the drive, you're referring to the drive-through window thing, right?
Not for this, no. This is just a water line extension.
It is the water line, okay.
We're going to get to that. Next item is the VC Mobile Home Park. As you all know, I'm working with the CVTC Utilities Director and the County Public Safety Director to make sure we maintain water supply and fire protection to those 71 residences down there. We had a meeting last, I think it was Friday, and we think we got a good method on how we're going to proceed with that. I've got to rewrite my letter to the state that will be submitted through CVTC, asking them if we can temporarily use some of their existing water infrastructure that they're not going to be using anymore, and also modifying that. And I think you've got a copy in your packet of a letter that I finally got a communication from the residents at the mobile home park, and I responded to that, telling them where we are on that. I sent them another communication late last week, keep them, or early this week, to keep them informed of what's going on there. But we think we got a good plan on how we're gonna go forward with that. And I'm talking with Glenn about getting a water line extension down to the park for potable water purposes. And I think we can probably have that done by mid-year if we can get the state to agree to let us, give us permission to modify and use their infrastructure. Next one is going to take a bit of explaining. This is the Grand Creek reservoir improvements, the dam improvements. We're still waiting on the grant application for the emergency action plan update. I'm working with the financial consultants on the funding for the dam improvements themselves. They, as you all recall, they were here last month and they reported that right now the market's pretty fluid, but rates are fairly low, and we pretty much got the money. One of the things that I mentioned with the financial report that I've got some concerns about revenue going forward. And if we get hit with some severe revenue shortages over the next several months, we may end up having to dip into reserves to maintain normal operations. So I went ahead and started making some phone calls and some emails, got hold of DCR to ask about the possibility of a 1-year extension on doing this project. And they came back to me and said that they'd be willing to entertain, because of COVID-19, they'd be willing to entertain that. And I told them I would get with the board at this meeting and get back with them if you all want to consider doing it. Now, I've also talked with the financial consultants, and we talked, it was a conference call early last week, and they said that if we have any concerns at all about revenues, it would probably be the better part of discretion to ask for that delay from DCR and wait. But there's some information in here about things we talked about, and if you all are at all interested in doing this, what I was going to propose is that I go back to DCR, ask them for the extension, and if they grant it, we don't necessarily have to take it. And I've talked to Davenport; they're willing to come to the June board meeting and explain in detail what we're talking about doing and how that would affect the project. But right now, I'm just looking for some direction from you all about whether or not an extension is something you at least want me to continue looking into.
Would we risk losing any funding that we've been guaranteed thus far?
No, ma'am, it's all in reserves. So yeah, see that's the other thing about this project is I've got about 30-year history of any time that one of my clients, and of course I'm my own client in this situation, but anytime one of my clients has had an unfunded mandate to do a project that only has to do because a government agency changed their regulations, and it's not necessarily something that needs to get done, I've always been a big advocate. If I can find a way to delay it, I delay it. And so this is an opportunity to delay this, get more money put away, and that's my recommendation right now. At least not to do it, but to at least pursue it and find out what DCR is willing to do.
So do you need
just direction to proceed? That's all.
Guidance from us. What numbers do you think?
I think that makes perfect sense at this point in time with the revenues that we see, and also with the recommendation from Mr. Hopkins.
I agree with that, Madam Chair.
I agree with that. I wanted to ask this earlier, but it goes along with this, Mr. Hopkins. So ever since I've been on this authority, the financial reports have been negative. How long is it going to be before we're going to have to dip into the reserves just to operate if we keep going away?
Not anytime in the near future. I would say third quarter, I would think. But I'm hoping things are going to turn around. We haven't been hit hard here. I'm hoping the governor my understanding is he's getting a lot of recommendations to start opening counties that haven't been hard hit, and pretty much everything west of Richmond is pretty much has been hit pretty light. And if he goes through and agrees that counties that have not been hit hard, if he does it county by county, we might be able to get an early opening and do it properly, and we'll be okay.
I mean, I understand. Yet earlier, I believe you said that the information you've given us really doesn't even reflect the COVID-19 issue yet. So, I mean, we've been in the negatives even before the COVID hit.
Yes, sir.
So, I mean, what kind of recommendations do you have to turn us around to more positive?
Well, I've got we'll talk about it a little bit later. I've got another public service announcement coming out. You brought up at the last meeting or the meeting before that we needed to further explain to customers the suspensions of late fees and moratorium on cutoffs. So I've written another public service announcement. I want to get you all to review that, but we'll talk about that in a bit. Other than that, until we see what's going on, over the next couple of months, we're going to start cutting back on. We're not going to buy a truck this year, and I'm looking at the budget right now to see what else we can hold off on not do, and anything that we don't need to do, we're not going to do. Some of the projects I mentioned, we may hold off. I don't want to, like the project on the primary spillway at the dam, at the reservoir. I'd really like to do that because that is a hurricane prevention project. And I'd really like to get that done. Maybe some of the other projects we can move off on.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Moore, what were your thoughts on delay? All right, you got a consensus, Mr. Hopkins.
Thank you much. Related to the mobile home park, we're also looking, I'm working with Glenn and Dale on what we're going to do about the River Edge Park and a couple of other businesses down on the Rocky Hill Road. Let's see. Next item is business friendliness. Were there any questions? At the last board meeting, I talked about the benchmarking study and gave you all a copy. Have you all had a chance to come up with any questions? Are there any questions about that document? There was an article in the paper, the New Era Progress last week about it. I just wanted to know whether you all had any questions.
Any questions?
Okay, priority 1C is a policy for high availability fees. We need to start looking at that, or I need to start looking at that with Mr. Lockaby. I've mentioned before the W4 car wash project that is coming in, and I've heard about some rumors about there could be some other high water use development in the county, maybe not the near future, but we need to be in a position where we can start looking at this. So I'm going to start talking to our neighbors, Bedford, Campbell, and Nelson, and see about how they handle that kind of a situation. Particularly Campbell, because they have a lot more development than we do, industrial and commercial. And I'll be back with a report on that with a recommendation. Communications efforts. With the first PSA, we included a request, a form for people, all our customers, to mail back in their email addresses so we can finish populating our Notify software database. And they've been flooding in. I'm sure we've got well over 1,000 at this point, and they're coming in several hundred a day. So I'm going to repeat, put that form back in with the consumer confidence report. This should go out this month, and I'm hoping that by June we should have the vast majority of all the emails that we need. And we need to buy some more software, but we should be able to get away from the postal mailings and start emailing bills and CCRs and notices to customers. We should see those.
Do you have to, I mean, it seems like this is pretty labor intensive. Do you now have to take those emails and manually input them into your system?
I think we do, yes, ma'am.
Huh.
It's going to take a while.
Yeah, that's kind of ripe for error too.
I don't know what else to do about it.
Huh?
I don't know what else to do about it. If you've got a suggestion, I'd love to hear it. So with the ladies.
Y'all heard anything about any other ways, what other localities are doing other than manually entering them? No?
Just soliciting their website where they enter them in, but I don't think you'll be able to do that now.
Good luck on that one.
Thank you. We'll get it
Glad
done.
it's not me.
We'll get it done. Next item is the board reorganization. You all pick your second citizen. Welcome aboard, Mr. Perot, when you get appointed. Mr. Lockaby, what's the update on the articles of incorporation? Where are we on that?
We're going to advertise those for public hearing in July. Mr. Perot's told us that he is going to formally become a resident and registered voter here in Amherst County shortly after July 1. At that point, we'll be able to actually act upon the articles of incorporation with him as a named member. So I haven't frankly seen as a huge priority because it's still 2 months away. But yeah, all that needs to happen is for those two names to be filled in to the articles of incorporation, and we'll be ready to go to public hearing.
Thank you, appreciate it. And the last item is the water office renovations, which would be the drive-through. Ms. Tucker? You had some questions?
Yeah, I think, and I know that you have addressed this in several meetings, so it's not, I'm not saying it's a surprise, but, I think that I just kind of want you to walk through it, because I went up there and I kind of looked at it and envisioned what it would look like, and then around the back of the building and looked at it. And it seems to me that it would be creating a bottleneck at the very back of the building, but take all that out of it. I mean, what we're asking for is a man who's spending money at that place, that we want him to give us part of his property, is that right?
Yes, ma'am. Part of the property that he's not going to use, and right now is an eyesore. And I don't know whether he was planning, I'm sure he was thinking about cleaning it up. It's right now, it's overgrown. It's got a 6-foot torn down rusty chain link fence that is just falling all over the place. And of course, we would clean all that up for him, landscape it for him, and turn
I
it
think
into
he
something.
would plan on doing that, he wasn't gonna leave all that stuff there.
Well, maybe, I don't know. I haven't talked to Dave about that.
Board members, are you all familiar with what we're talking about here? You realize how close it comes to the emergency exits and entrances of that building? It's pretty daggone close.
So was this in response to some type of business friendly initiative, or was this because of COVID-19?
No, this was just an idea that I had when we first came on. Ever since I've been here, I've done an informal poll of customers. Whenever I talk to a customer on the phone, I just ask them if we were to put in a drive-through, whether it was a window or a device or whatever, is that something you all would be interested in? Is that something you would use? And everybody has been very, very enthusiastic, saying they would jump all over it. And right now, we've got especially the first of the month when bills come due and everybody's coming to pay, there is a major bottleneck on Phelps Road with traffic because we don't have any parking out there. During school, there's a lot of times they're coming in first thing in the morning. You've got kids waiting at the Phelps Road, South Amherst Highway intersection. You've got traffic coming in and out. Usually it's one lane because people are parking on both sides of the road to come pay their bills. And we've got a lot of older customers that I just thought this would be I'm sure they would much rather stay in their car and go to a drive-through than have to get out and park, walk in, maybe quite a ways, depending on where they have to park. It just seemed like a good idea. So it's something I've started working on ever since I first got here. I talked to Mr. McCormick at Waukesha about it about 1.5 to 2 years ago, and his initial response was, yeah, I don't see any problem with that. Yeah, we can make that work. But I think at the time, he was very deeply involved with the rest of the project. He probably didn't give it an awful lot of thought, and I didn't have a lot of details to give him. Now that he's seeing details, he's starting to have questions. And I think I've been able to answer all his questions. I haven't heard back from him in about a week. So if you all don't think this is a good idea, if you think it's a problem, then I'll stop right now. It just seemed like it was something I wanted to do for our customers. I think it's something we could do without too much trouble and without too much cost.
Madam Chair,
Ms. Ayers?
I support the idea. If we look at the overall average age of our citizenry, it's 56, 58 and above. My dad, after their years of aging, after the third of the month, that was one of his trips, was to make it to the court office to pay that bill, and he did it. Obviously in September, Dad's not there, and my mother is following the same thing. She has the inability to get out of her car to pay her bill. So last week I took it down and slid it through the night deposit to be paid. So the more convenience we can provide for our citizens, if this can work, I support it 100% because I've seen firsthand. A lot of our older people, that's how they don't do online banking, they don't do online anything. Some of them will put a check in the mail, but a lot of them, it's just the thing of what they've done their whole life is take their bills and pay it. So especially with the new development coming in down there, there will either be heavier traffic and a lot of them have to park across the street, make their way across the street to pay it. And if we can create easier access, I support that 100%.
And I agree with you. My concern is that we've got an individual who has invested in some property. He's got other plans for his property, which included a dog park and then redoing the ball field back there. And we all know that a lot of accidents happen in the parking lot. And so you've got people walking back and forth from their car to the apartment building. You've got people driving through there who are senior citizens and may not pay as much attention as we would like for them to. And one, I'm concerned about the safety. But two, I'm concerned that we've taken an individual who's invested in that community and then we're gonna take away a part of the property.
No, we're not taking anything. We're asking him if he will help us. I mean,
Is what?
we're not taking anything from him. We're asking Mr. McCormick if he would be willing to help us do this. And we're offering to beautify and landscape and make the area that we're talking about look better to
Well, I think
enhance the
that
property.
he has every intention of tending to that side of the building as he gets through the rest of it, but.
Madam Chair, if I may, I agree, Mr. Ayers, and furthermore, frankly, the decision will be up to Mr. McCormick in the end of whether or not he wants this. So until that decision is made, we're really just spinning our wheels here. Mr. Hopkins needs to speak with him and see what happens. If this plan falls through, then we can come up with a plan B, whatever that may be. But that decision is going to be between him and you, and then you bring that information back to us, so.
Well, in full disclosure, because I was wondering what his opinion was, so I just took the phone and called him, he called me back this morning. And I said, if you're okay with that, that's great, good for you, we appreciate it. And he said, well, I'm not really okay with it. He said, I think that we've got a way to work around this. So I would just encourage you to have a more direct conversation with him.
I'm trying,
Yeah.
I can't get him. I mean, most of our talk has been by email, just so we've got everything down documented. I think both of us want it that way.
I mean, he wants to be a team player, he really does, but I don't want him to feel like he has to do something.
No,
Because he doesn't have to do anything.
I don't think I'm putting any pressure on him. The only pressure, if you want to call it pressure, I've told him that if we're going to do this, now would be the time to start because we want to do the construction now while he's under construction. I wouldn't want to go in after he's leased the apartments out and go in and start tearing things up to put this in. So I'm just asking for him as to whether or not whether he's willing to help us or not.
Yeah, I'm with Mr. Q. I mean, it's his decision at the end of the day. We think, conceptually, we think what you're trying to do is a good idea, but it's his land, his property, so you all work that out.
Okay, hang on.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Martin?
I don't have an issue with you trying to get an easement from Waukesha. I would like to see some more cost estimates on what this access road would actually cost. It looks like, just from the photos you submitted, there are some grades to deal with in the cross section. And without seeing those, I'm not sure it's prudent to be spending money on it right now.
Well, we're not, and I'm not going to.
So again, pursuing the easement's fine, more connectivity, better access for the elderly, so on and so forth. Everybody can get behind that, but until we see cost, so I'm fine with pursuing the easement.
And is it correct that no money has been spent thus far?
No, ma'am. It's all been my time. And most of that time is outside work hours. It's been on weekends.
But nothing from any engineers or anything like that?
That would be the next thing. What I'd want to do if Mr. McCormick agrees to the easement. Right now, I'm not even sure it would work. I think it will work, but until I can get Hurt Profit in there to survey it and work with me on a design, we really don't know.
Okay.
So, but until we get the easement, I don't even want to start with that.
Ms. Rogers, you have
I have just some useful information. I want the board to know that in the information that we provided to the Madison Heights Master Plan, Dan Tyler and his group is doing design. One of the things that we asked him to include in the design was to set aside an acre for a new service authority office. So where and how that is yet to be determined, but in our planning, we're trying to make accommodation for a whole new service authority office because of Bob and I's discussions about maybe finding a whole new location. And I think he's trying to make what he's got work the best, but we could probably get something that's right in the center of everything, including housing for retirees and that sort of thing too. The plan is to make it a walkable community. So I just wanted you to know that we're planning for that.
All right, thank you. All right, next.
But nothing more on drive-through?
Any other questions, board members?
I would just say, before that would happen, we need to see some turnaround in our revenue stream before we
True.
discuss some of these things. I think that's what Mr. Marshall is also getting at as well.
Okay, new business. First item is an update on the pandemic. You got a copy of the first public service announcement that was mailed out to customers a few weeks ago. And you've also got the second one that I drafted up in response to Mr. Martin's comments a couple board meetings ago, or in his last one. And so I'm looking, if you all have a chance to review it, and if you all are okay with it, if you have any changes, I want to get it out this month, if at all possible. If y'all need more time, then maybe you can respond by email, or I don't really want to wait till the June meeting if we don't have to.
Board members?
I'm fine with saying.
Mr. Ayers?
I'm fine.
Ms. Good? Ms. Moore?
I'm fine with it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next item is I've got an email from Virginia American Water Works Association that they found that FEMA is, they have several million face masks that they are willing to distribute to water and sewer utilities with the stipulation that they are used only by water and sewer utility personnel. And I put in a request with AWWA for 2 per person, 50 total. So we'd have a couple extra. And Geneva Hudgens responded that FEMA is actually designated 5 per person. They're reusable. So this would probably be close to 6 months worth of face masks. And we should have them in a couple of weeks.
So how many masks did they find?
I heard 5 million.
Okay.
We've requested 100.
So they found 5 million masks, but over the past several weeks, there was a shortage of.
That's my understanding.
Okay.
I'm sorry, 7 million.
Well, by all means, give us.
As many as you can.
I'm going to. Oh, and while we're talking about it, assuming they come in, and I talked to the ladies downstairs, once we get the masks in, and if things keep going with the county, with the pandemic the way it's going, I mean, our numbers are creeping up a little bit the last couple of weeks. I'm hoping that trend reverses. But I wanted, and I'm not looking for a decision today. I thought I'd bring it back up at the June meeting, but I want you all to start thinking about the possibility of reopening the water office. If we have, if the numbers hold for the county like they have been, if we get the masks in, I just think it'd be something that I want to explore doing to get the public area back open. So I'll be back in June to talk about that. Unless you all want to talk about it now.
I'm fine with talking about it now. If you're, I think when you're comfortable in opening the water office back up, you should open the water office back up. I'm not sure you need to talk to us about it. We'll wait till June. So we'll see what the governor's going to do next week, but I'd go based off of that.
Okay.
Well, you
That's
already,
my opinion.
there's already glass up, so the only contact they really have is sliding under the window, and you can't have more than 2 people in there at one time anyway. It's not that big.
Well, we would have to set it up so you can do that, but no, we've had 10, 15 people in there at a time. They really pack in on payday.
Tight.
Have you done them loads?
No, my policy the last 2 months is avoid everything and everybody. I don't leave the house unless I absolutely have to.
Yeah, I would leave that up to your discretion.
Okay.
That's me.
We've been stockpiling critical chemicals and materials at the water plant, water office. We've had a few false alarms with personnel. One of our staff members actually had to go home twice, and two others, one each. They were sent home to self-isolate, and they were sent home and didn't return until they were cleared. So we're okay there. We're documenting all that information, so we've got it if anybody ever asks. The informational webinars and conference calls are continuing. Seems like I get at least 2 or 3 offerings a day for more webinars to go to. And the Virginia Water Wastewater Agency Response Network is now doing a weekly conference call on Wednesday afternoons about 1 o'clock, and I've attended all of those. At the last one, they talked about how VML and VACO did a study that we found about utility revenue losses. Of course, this is nationwide, but VML and VACO are projecting that for water only for this country at $32.7 billion with a B. So hopefully we haven't hit that hard yet, and hopefully we won't be, but that's just something to think about. I heard about 2 weeks ago about a new stimulus package sponsored by senators from North Dakota, West Virginia, Illinois, and Maryland. It included funding for water and sewer infrastructure. And I've been asking around for the last several weeks about possible stimulus money for revenue losses due to COVID. And when I saw this, I sent emails to those 4 senators, along with our 2 senators, and Ben Klein, our 6th district representative, and asking them if they could modify that bill and to include money for utilities that are hard hit revenue-wise by COVID. And if they can't do that one, then do a new one. I mean, I don't know why Warner and Kane couldn't sponsor a bill or something like that. And most of my responses from the 4 have been, well, you're not from our district, you're not from our state, so we can't help you. But I asked Warner and Kane and Klein, go talk to them and see if there's something you want. Okay, I think I mentioned a few minutes ago about the stimulus money for the construction-ready projects for Lakeview. So that's also on my list here, so I'll mention that again. And we've talked about the possible extension of deadlines for state-mandated, non-state funded cost of capital projects. I've got my direction on that. Let's see. There's also, along the same lines, EPA has a mandate out. This is not a cost issue, but there's a study that all utilities have to do. It's a utilities risk and resiliency assessment. That it does a risk assessment of your entire utility. And our deadline for our size utility is to get that submitted is June 30th of next year. And by the end of next year, we also have to update our emergency action plan. So along those same lines, I contacted EPA, our Region 3 rep, and asked her about a possible extension if something that were to come up. And she said that the extension for that matter is not available because the schedule is statutory. But she said that they've been given direction to, if you have COVID-19 issues, to be rather lax on enforcement of the deadline situation. So right now, I don't think we're going to have a problem with it, but in case we do, I just want to touch base with EPA to see if there was any leeway there. And that's all I've got on COVID-19, unless you all have any questions.
Madam Chair, these reports are all public information, correct?
Which reports?
The report we just went over, that's public information, correct? So I would just ask that we be a little bit more mindful about mentioning employees' names as it relates to their health issues. You referenced 2 employees that were sent home by name to self-isolation. I'm not sure if that violates anything, Mr. Lockerbie, but probably shouldn't be listing that out in information.
Okay. Thank you. I will take that and keep that in mind.
Rick? I'm not going to comment on the matter right now, but I certainly think it'd be a good idea.
Okay. Next item is the succession plan for the service authority. At my evaluation last month, I was informed that 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 one of the things I was downgraded on was the fact that we don't have a succession plan. And I wanted to let you all know that while we do not have one that is finalized and approved by the board, there's one that I've been developing ever since I came on board. I really didn't have any choice because of all the senior people that we could end up losing within the next 5 years. And, so I was in a position where I had to start working on this right away. I've included a couple of organization charts. First one is our current chart, and you can see that we have 3 of our top supervisors and managers are either gone or are expected to be gone within probably the next 5 years, along with senior county clerk. And you can see that our construction crew is now understaffed because of people that we've lost, and then we may be losing another person within the next few years. So this is something that I've had to work on, and I've been working on for essentially ever since I came on board. It's just that I've never gotten to the point where it was ready to be presented, and I was ever asked about it. So this is the first time I brought it to you. But if you go through and look at, I don't know how much detail you want me to go into this about all the different. I've got all the problems with the existing organization chart listed in the item report. And the next org chart is the one that I'm working on as a replacement to address a lot of the issues. And again, I'm not looking for any kind of approval or anything right now because it's still a work in development. But I just want to let you know that we are working on this. I've been working with Len and Dale and Charlene on this for the last 4 years. So this is where we are on it right now. Part of it is going to be, I'd like to consolidate it somewhat. If I remember correctly, if you go back to the first chart, I think there is a county requirement in the HR manual that promotions cannot include a 2 pay grade jump. And you can see that we have 1, 2, at least 3 positions on the existing chart that would involve a 2 pay grade jump for a promotion. So I figure I needed to address that. We've got some positions that we really don't need. So I'm talking about proposing getting rid of them and just consolidating the overall chart.
Mr. Hopkins, on the 2 pay grade jump, you might want to check with HR on that. You may be accurate, but I would definitely double check.
Well, I remember reading it. That was a while back, but I will do that. So unless you all have any questions, again, this is just for information only at this point.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Moving on from matters to Mr. Hopkins.
A few more things. A couple of miscellaneous updates. The 2019 audit. I got an email last week that Brown & Edwards is in their 2nd review of the draft audit. We should probably get the draft audit for our review in mid-May and final documents by the end of the month, early June. And I'm working with Susan Chapman to schedule the Brown & Edwards presentation to the board. It's probably in August like it usually is. We have just finished getting the Price of Store water tank repainted, both exterior and interior. We always do that at the end of the 10-year maintenance contract. We're in the process right now. If I remember correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, but they finished the work. We filled it, disinfected it, flushed it, and we're filling it again. And the tank should be back in service in about a week.
We're back on service.
Are we? Okay. So I'm behind on that. And I'm working on the bid documents for the next 10-year maintenance contract. Probably get them out late this month, early next month. ACSA staff. I just mentioned that our construction crew is understaffed right now. We need 2 positions right now. We just hired a utility mechanic. He started yesterday. We're interviewing for a 2nd utility mechanic tomorrow. Then Glenn and I are going to start work on the maintenance supervisor position. I've got it advertised. I must have at least 24 email responses, people that are interested in the job, but we'll start working on that next week. And I guess that's all I need to say about staff, unless you all have anything else.
All right.
And the last thing I've got is just my schedule, and it's there for your information.
All right, moving on to matters from Service Authority Board, Mr. Ayers.
Madam Chair, Mr. Hopkins.
Sure.
I know one of our last meetings, the car wash project that's slated there from Madison Heights, are those people back on board, or were you able to communicate with them? What is this?
I haven't heard anything back from them. I sent them 2 or 3 emails. I mean, I think the plans are, if they're not approved, they're close to approved. And so I sent them like about an email a week for 3 weeks in a row to their engineer saying, I want to work with you on the availability fee, because based on the numbers you gave me, it would be humongous, and we don't want to hit you with that. And I proposed how I would like to address it. I told them if you all are okay with that, I'm going to take it to my board, and I think that I told them I think the board would okay it, but I haven't heard anything back.
Notice the property's getting pretty rough looking shape, but just was wondering if you.
I'll touch base with them again.
Thank you.
Mr. Martin.
I believe at the last meeting, I brought up the idea of requiring connections to do water line extensions. Can we just not really decide that?
Just like that here.
Can you repeat that question, Mr. Martin? I apologize.
Requiring connections to public water and sewer. I think we require sewer, but not water right now.
Okay.
And we're going to look into a code requirement for that.
There are, for water authorities, you can't require somebody to abandon an existing source, but you can require them to not create a new source and to connect if they ever stop.
Yeah.
I believe cities and towns can require abandonment, but we have less.
Well, my point being is if there's a water line there and it's a new house, they should connect to the water line, not drill a well.
Ms. Hopkins, did you have something you want to say about that?
Yes, ma'am. I'm absolutely in agreement with you. I mean, the concept, I think it's a great idea. Anything we can do to get more connections and get our sales revenue up is wonderful. I would caution you to be careful about doing it with water, and we require them for sewer, but sewer is more of a public health issue. I mean, if you've got a drain field that is going bad, and you got partially treated sewage that's surfacing, you got animals and kids running through it, you got odors, and it's an eyesore. Your neighbors are going to want you to, if they're going to be happy that you're required to get off that and connect to the sewer. But I would think if I was a homeowner on a well or some other source, and being compelled to connect to a public water line, my response would be, hey, I'm not affecting anybody else. This is my business. This is not a public health issue. It's not affecting my customers in any way. And I'm just saying it's something to think about.
Well, I understand what you're saying. That is until your well gets contaminated or gets dry. I think the point is that we put hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars into water line infrastructure. And as we continue to do that, the only way we're going to recoup that cost is by having customers, right? So moving forward, if there's new construction, new dwellings, new commercial, I believe we should look into requiring a connection to the water line. Existing residences, I understand that we can't do that, but moving forward for new construction, I would like, just myself, would like for us to examine what it would take to require.
I'm all for it. I'm just cautious about public pushback and developers pushback.
I understand, but there's no need to put the infrastructure in the ground if we're not
I agree.
going to use it and sell water, because that's what the service authority does, right?
Ms. Martin, what would you like to see? I mean, because I agree with you on this one. What would you like for Mr. Hopkins to do to make sure that this doesn't fall by the wayside?
I would like for him to work with Mr. Lockerbie and the county administrator and putting forth code.
Board members, does everybody agree on that?
I'm fine with it.
Mr. Pugh?
Oh, it's kind of getting on the same subject, and I don't recall us ever having a major problem with that, actually. What I always was concerned about was, for instance, Lakeview subdivision on Seminole Drive, where we've been extending sewer lines into that area to serve previous developed areas. I mean, this is where I remember some discussions in the past when Mr. French was on board, requiring some of those residents pre-existing water and sewer, making them connect to the new infrastructure. And you're saying we're not required to do that, but let's say they have a failing septic system, and that's going to fail. At that point in time, you still can't require them to hook onto that if they choose to go to a septic system.
They can replace it, they can upgrade it, they can put in a different kind of system.
But
What the whole purpose of that program is to have sewers there when those drain fields start to go down.
yeah,
That's what we're doing.
a lot of the lots to get a traditional septic drain field in there are not adequate. They're small, so you'd have to pay even more to get that in there. So it'd probably be an advantage to go ahead and connect.
Well, not only that, but typically, depending on how bad the repair is, it's going to be cheaper to connect than it is to repair the sewer. And once the sewer is there, even if your drain field is still good, if you connect within 12 months, you get a 60% cut on your availability.
Because, I mean, that's another thing I was thinking about, really, as far as hooking to public water versus drilling a well. You're probably coming cheaper than actually drilling a well.
Without a doubt.
Yeah. So, I mean, when you look at the economics of the situation, I don't see why you go ahead and drill a well versus hook up to the
I know
system.
I wouldn't.
All right, Mr. Hopkins, Mr. Lockaby, there's a director from the board regarding the wells, so can you just put that on your list, please?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Usually, some of the ones like you talking about Lakeview on
Mhm.
is normally on a situation like that, if they was complaining something with the health department involved. I know we've had some where the health department comes in and tells the customer, you got to do something. You either got to get them a county or, and most of the time they'll get an our system rather than dig up everything and up every drain field back.
Yeah.
Usually the health department gets involved on that, and they tell the homeowner that they don't have a choice, they got to do one or the other.
Ms. Pugh, do you have anything else?
Oh, no.
Ms. Moore?
I don't have anything.
And I don't have anything. All right, board members, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Meeting's adjourned. Thank you.
Job security.